One introduction RAWSEP view the United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only. For home building and furniture building, for just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable, wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lungs, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, the eco-design wood stove, and international convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. RAWSEP view purple air PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.
Hi, my name is Lily. Andrew gave you the intro to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates and their concern for air pollution from indoor residential wood burning. Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, or RAWSEP, would like every near neighbor of an indoor residential wood burner whose wood smoke enters their yards and sickens the near neighbors to have a purple air PM 2.5 monitor hanging from the eaves of their home to measure the level of PM 2.5 entering their yards. That measurement of air pollution should be used as evidence of unnecessary air pollution, and each indoor residential wood burner should be shut down based on that evidence, one indoor residential wood burner at a time if necessary. The presentation by Andrew ended at 2 minutes 5 seconds. The same presentation by Emma starts at 2 minutes 3 seconds before the end of this podcast. So I am Lily, your timekeeper, and you can start the next podcast at 2 minutes 5 seconds in if you would not like to see the presentation by Andrew a second time. This presentation by me, Lily, ends at 5 minutes in. What you will see in the main content of this RAWSEP podcast will be news about air pollution from indoor residential wood burning and how that air pollution is being combated by ordinary people just like you who are unfortunately near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners at this time. There will also be news about unnecessary and highly polluting use of wood as fuel in industrial wood burners and preventable air pollution from wood burning wildfires. There will also be news about air pollution from PM 2.5 from gas-powered cars. There will also be news about airborne diseases which are also preventable with vaccines such as COVID-19 and measles and whooping cough, to name just a few. In 2025, Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates is also concerned with combating the Trump destruction of government funding for programs which protect human health through the Department of Health and Human Services, and Trump destruction of programs which fund the science and medical research plan to protect human health from preventable illnesses. Protecting human health is a patriotic act, and our defense against enemies is weakened if we are not as healthy as we can be. Heat pump rebates are now offered by the federal government, distributed through the eligible United States, are available in 2025 and are the best, cleanest, and now cheapest alternative to indoor residential wood burning if that burning is actually done to purportedly save money. Wind and solar as sources of the electricity that powers heat pumps and electric cars is also cheaper than burning, with the adverse health effects that are caused by indoor residential wood burning also come at a cost to near neighbors, both in shortening and ending their lives and in actual hospital, clinic, and funeral costs. Instead of being compensated monetarily, near neighbors should instead be able to achieve immediate relief by stopping indoor residential wood burning in their hyper-localized neighborhoods, which relief readings from purple air PM 2.5 monitors used as evidence of air pollution will help them achieve. Welcome to news about hopeful scientific and medical achievements that will also help us achieve the goal of clean air to breathe.
Episode 57 DHD May 2, 2025 Kennedy Jr. potentially delays COVID vaccine and attacks measles vaccine. In episode 57 DHD0 RAWSEP View Names of Children Today 1 Kentucky Derby Names of Horse Competitors 2 United States Interview with Trump 3 United States The American Economy is Contracting 4A Headlines The New York Times May 2, 2025 5A Headlines The New York Times May 1, 2025 5B Trump Vaccines Kennedy issues demands for vaccine approvals that could affect fall COVID boosters 5C Hawaii and Michigan lawsuits versus fossil fuel companies face attempted blocks by pre-emptive Trump lawsuits against both Hawaii and Michigan 6A Headlines The Guardian May 1, 2025 6B United States and measles RFK Jr. and health agency falsely claim the measles, mumps and rubella vaccine includes aborted fetus debris 6C United States and science and medicine private firms are trying to fill research gaps but their puny budgets are no match for federal funds 6D United States video game writing playing with words why novelists are becoming video game writers and vice versa 6C United Kingdom ugly old-fashioned. We're the baby names that set the teeth of grandparents on edge 7A Headlines Other Media May 1, 2025 Main Content 7B May Day Protests Thousands rally against Trump Musk in nationwide May Day protests 7C Trump Tariffs versus United States Senate A bipartisan measure to undo the Trump global tariffs fails in the Senate Main Content 0 RAWSEP View of Names of Children Today Naming Conventions and Gaming the System Item 1 The names of the top 20 contenders in the Kentucky Derby appear to be conventionally chosen based on hobbies of owners or names of sires and dams more conventionally known as fathers and mothers of the horses Item in 6B Headlines The Guardian May 1, 2025 United Kingdom The UK Popular baby names in 2025 United Kingdom Ugly old-fashioned We're the baby names that set the teeth of grandparents on edge baby names The Guardian excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates A 501c3 nonprofit organization 1 in 5 grandparents has struggled to come to terms with the name of a grandchild according to a survey from Grants Nick Poor Older or Tabitha Elijah and Finn 1 in 5 or 20% of grandparents say they have hated one of the names of their grandkids Luckily only 4% say they still hate the name 15% have got used to it over time A common complaint is grandparents objecting to names honoring other grandparents What are their other complaints? Names they think are ugly 28% or old-fashioned 11% or weird 17% 6% were okay with the name but did not like the spelling 31% of grandparents say the name of their grandchild is none of their business but 69% think it is fine to give an opinion on the name of their grandchild if asked so the smart advice is do not ask always Did the surveyed grandparents list any specific names they disliked? They did Their top hated names were Aura Charlotte Elijah Finn Jack Lindsay Noah Sally and Tabitha The point here seems to be stay in your lane granddad and stay out of baby naming and also are you still okay to babysit Tuesday? Granddad replies you mean Tuesday this week? Or is the kid called Tuesday? Is this a bigger problem than it used to be? It could be now that our cultural obsession with individuality has given rise to the position of baby name consultant. A baby name consultant might say your bespoke grandchild names are wheat, berry, dusty mushroom and candle that will be £800 please. A baby name consultant should not say sorry I sent you the wrong list I also do names for white paint. 1 Kentucky Derby Names of Horse Competitors RAWSEP View 1 view is that unconventional naming conventions show spontaneity and fun in the midst of conventional if accelerated money grabs by Republican politicians. A second possible RAWSEP view is that the names of the top 20 contenders in the Kentucky Derby appear to be conventionally chosen based on hobbies of owners or names of sires and dams more conventionally known as fathers and mothers of the horses. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization Forbes May 1, 2025 list of the 20 horses racing in the Kentucky Derby 1 Citizen Bull trainer Bob Baffert jockey Martin Garcia odds 20 to 1 The owner likes his Citizen Bull head watches Tunio equals trainer Safi Joseph Jr. jockey Edgar Zayas 30 to 1 The sire was named Neolithic 3 Final Gambit trainer Brad Cox jockey Luan Machado odds 30 to 1 The horse is named for a move-in Pokemon 4 Rodriguez trainer Bob Baffert jockey Mike Smith odds 12-1 The horse is named for the American musician Sixto Rodriguez 5 American Promise trainer Dwayne Lucas jockey Nick Harris odds 30-1 The Love of America by the owners led them to American Promise 6 Admire Daytona trainer Yukihiro Kato jockey Christophe Lemaire odds 30-1 Admires used in horse names by these Japanese owners coupled with Daytona Florida being an auto racing city 7 Luxor Cafe trainer Noriyuki Hori jockey Joao Moreira odds 15-1 Cafe is traditional for the stable A sire is American Pharaoh 8 journalism trainer Michael McCarthy jockey Umberto Rispoli odds 3-1 The owner was the sports editor of his high school newspaper 9 Burnham Square trainer Ian Wilkes jockey Brian Joseph Hernandez Jr. odds 12-1 The daughter-in-law of the female owner uses the quilting block pattern Burnham Square 10 Grand 8 trainer Todd Pletcher jockey John Velasquez odds 10-1 The owner is expecting big things 11 Flying Mohawk trainer Whit Beckman jockey Joseph Ramos odds 30-1 This horse was sired by Karakunti a Mohawk word that roughly translates to flying sun burning across the sky 12 East Avenue trainer Brendan Walsh jockey Manny Franco odds 20-1 East Avenue is where the Saratoga, New York training facility is located 13 Publisher trainer Steve Ismussen jockey Flavian Pratt odds 20-1 The owner just liked the name 14 Tistastic trainer Steve Ismussen jockey Joel Rosario odds 20-1 Sired by Tis the Law 15 Render Judgment trainer Kenny McBeak jockey Sheldon Russell odds 30-1 The sire was named Blame 16 Colt Battle trainer Lonnie Briley jockey Juan Vargas odds 30-1 The name of the sire was Cole Front 17 Sandman trainer Mark Cass jockey Jose Ortiz odds 6-1 The owner Jonathan Green likes the Metallica song Enter Sandman but the horse was named more because baseball pitcher Mariano Rivera walked onto the mound in Yankee Stadium as the Metallica song blared over the public address system 18 Sovereignty trainer Bill Mott jockey Manbo Franco odds 5-1 The dam was named Crown 19 Chunk of Gold trainer Ethan West jockey Jared Loveberry odds 30-1 The dam is play for gold and her dam is gold in shaft 20 An almighty trainer Brian Lynch jockey Javier Castellano odds 30-1 The owner named this one after his son Owen. 2 United States interview with Trump excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates a 501c3 nonprofit organization The Atlantic This article was featured in the One Story to Read Today newsletter May 1, 2025 Before we begin a primer on the science of arranging an interview with a sitting American president an Ordinary Times reporter seeking an on-the-record encounter with the Commander-in-Chief first write an elaborate proposal The proposal details the goals of the interview the broad areas of concern and the many reasons the president must for his own good talk to these particular reporters and not other perfectly adequate but still lesser reporters This pitch is then sent to White House officials if the universe bends favorably negotiations ensue if the staff feel reasonably confident that the interview will somehow help their cause they will ask the president with trepidation at times to sit for the interview. Sometimes the president will agree we made our pitch which wouldn't like this President Trump by virtue of winning a second term and so dramatically reshaping the country and the world can now be considered the most consequential American leader of the 21st century and we want to describe in detail how this came to be just 4 years ago after the violent insurrection he fomented Trump appeared to be finished social media companies had banned or suspended him and he had been repudiated by corporate donors Republicans had denounced him and the country was moving on to the fresh start of the presidency of Joe Biden then came further blows the indictments the civil judgments and the endless disavowals by people who once worked for him. 3 United States The American economy is contracting also in this article Trump this week probably as a distraction from focus on the failed Trump economy continued digging in on his claim that symbols tattooed on the fingers of Kilmar Abrego Garcia a cross, a skull, a smiley face and a marijuana leaf are proof that the man they wrongly deported to El Salvador is a member of MS-13 RAWSEP view during a televised interview Trump pointed to an apparently doctored photograph of the hands of Abrego Garcia and Trump said superimpositions which Trump saw as real spelled out MS-13 the gang name although the journalist Terry Moran interviewing Trump pointed out that the letters and numbers MS-13 superimposed on the fingers or knuckles of Abrego Garcia appear to experts to be artificial intelligence AI generated. The takeaway message from this interview is that Trump is doubling down on keeping a man apparently innocent of any crime except entering the United States illegally incarcerated in a foreign prison when as the US President Trump has the power to make a simple phone call in GitHub Rego Garcia released, or as The Guardian put it in headlines, The Guardian Trump interview. Trump pressures journalists to accept doctored photo as real. Why do not you just say yes? Trump asks the journalist. The Guardian, May 1, 2025. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. Substack letters from an America. Heather Cox Richardson, May 1, 2025. This morning the Bureau of Economic Analysis released a report showing an abrupt reversal in the U.S. economy. Gross domestic product (GDP), which measures the total market value of goods and services, shrank from a healthy 2.4% in the last quarter of 2024 to 0.3% in the first quarter of 2025. The shift is the first time in 3 years that the economy has contracted. The slump appears to have been fueled by a surge in buying overseas goods before the Trump tariffs hit. The stock market plunged on the news, although it would recover later in the day. The stock market during President Trump's first 100 days in office has been the worst since the administration of Richard Nixon. Today, Trump posted on his social media site, "This is the stock market of Biden, not Trump. I did not take over until January 20th. The White House put out an official statement blaming former President Joe Biden for today. The report today of the shrinking GDP and saying the underlying economic numbers in the United States remain strong. In fact, Biden left behind an economy that The Economist called the envy of the world, showing on the cover of the October special issue about the U.S. economy with the roll of $100 bills blasting off into space. In the Biden 4 years, the U.S. had added 16 million jobs. Unemployment was at its lowest rate in 50 years. Real wages for the bottom 80% of Americans were increasing, and inflation levels had come down almost to the target of the Federal Reserve from their highs during the post-shutdown shocks. The pain from the Trump tariffs has already hit agriculture, as China has largely stopped buying American products, from pork and soybeans to lumber. The executive director of the Agriculture Transportation Coalition, a leading export trade group for farmers, said the sector is already in full-blown crisis as farmers have sustained massive financial losses. Economists expect the confusion and uncertainty of the Trump tariffs to hurt growth more broadly in the second quarter of 2025 as container ships from China stop arriving in the U.S. in early to mid-May, about a month after the Trump April 2nd Liberation Day imposed a 145% tariff on goods from that country. The executive director of the Port of Los Angeles said shipping volume at the port will drop over 35%. The executive director of the Port of Oakland, California, noted that the lack of import trade will hurt exports as well, endangering the jobs of dock workers, warehouse workers, and truck operators. The East Coast ports will see similar drops a couple of weeks after the West Coast ports. United Parcel Service (UPS) has already announced that it is laying off about 20,000 employees and closing 73 of its buildings by the end of June. It says it anticipates lower volumes of shipping from its largest customer, Amazon, because of the tariffs. Economists expect the lack of goods from around the globe, especially from China, to create shortages and higher prices. Notably, the tariffs will hit toys and Christmas items. China produces 80% of the toys sold in the U.S. and 90% of the Christmas goods. Ordering of inventory for the holidays is normally underway by now, as it takes 4 to 5 months to make, package, and ship products to the U.S. from China, but currently the tariffs have shut down that trade. Trump seemed to acknowledge that today when he said, "Well, maybe the children will have $2 instead of $30, you know. And maybe the $2 will cost a couple of bucks more than they would normally." Ironically, the Republican Party made accusations that Biden was ruining Christmas, a central theme of political attack in 2022 and 2023. More than 80% of senior executives are worried about the Trump tariffs and his other economic policies, and many companies say they are unable to predict future earnings. The Constitution gave to Congress, not the President, the power to set tariffs. Trump is taking that power to himself by using the International Emergency Economic Powers Act (TEPA) to enact his sweeping tariffs. This law authorizes a president to regulate international trade during a national emergency. On February 1, Trump declared such a national emergency to impose tariffs on China, Canada, and Mexico, and on April 2 he again invoked it for his new blanket tariffs. Congress could end the Trump power over tariffs by canceling the national emergency, a step Democrats were willing to take, but Republicans in the House used a procedural rule to make sure that Democrats could not cancel that emergency. A challenge to the Trump declaration of a national emergency must come to the floor for a vote within 18 days of the challenged the House defying that rule by declaring that each day for the rest of the congressional session will not constitute a day for purposes of the National Emergencies Act. In the Senate this evening, Republican leaders killed a similar Democratic measure. 3 Republican senators, Susan Collins of Maine, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska and Rand Paul of Kentucky, voted with the Democrats. It is just totally bonker bananas. Where are we going? Are we near trading deals with India and Japan? That means less tariff revenue. Although the Supreme Court unanimously agreed with the lower court that the administration must work to get Abrego Garcia back from El Salvador, the White House has insisted that it cannot comply because only President Nayib Bukele of El Salvador can release Abrego Garcia. But when Moran said to Trump he could pick up the phone and get him back, Trump replied, "I could, and if he were the gentleman that you say he is, I would do that." When Moran replied, "But the court has ordered you to facilitate that," Trump replied, "I am not the one making this decision. We have lawyers who do not want to do this. You're the president." Moran replied. 4 headlines. The New York Times, May 2, 2025. Trump tariffs. Trump ends Chinese tariff loophole, raising the cost of online goods. The New York Times. Trump tariffs, what a disappearing tariff loophole could mean for your next online order. The New York Times. Minnesota Jill Sobule, singer of If Kissed a Girl, dies in house fire. The New York Times. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Jill Sobule, the singer and songwriter whose hit I Kissed a Girl were followed by 3 decades of touring advocacy and a one-woman musical, died on Thursday morning in a house fire in Woodbury, Minnesota. According to her publicist, she was 66. The Public Safety Department in Woodbury, a Minneapolis suburb, said that firefighters had responded at 5:30 a.m. to a house that was engulfed in flames. The homeowners said one person was possibly still inside. Firefighters found the body of a woman in her 60s inside the house. The department said the cause of the fire was not immediately clear. Australia. What the vote in Australia means for climate and a major coal economy. The New York Times. Australia, why Trump looms over the election in Australia. The New York Times. The United Kingdom. Reform. UK wins special election in Runcorn by just 6 votes. The New York Times. Ukraine. Life in Ukraine has become more dangerous since ceasefire talks began. The New York Times. Ukraine once banished from the Trump White House. Zelensky has new hope. The New York Times. Ukraine. U.S. payoff for Ukraine minerals deal faces many hurdles. The New York Times. 5A headlines. The New York Times, May 1, 2025. Trump culture, opinion, right-wing counterculture, vitality, masculinity, transgression. The New York Times. Trump culture, opinion. The U.S. needs more guns and soldiers now. It cannot handle a war. The New York Times. Trump Doge. Musk is less confident about Doge goals 100 days into Trump presidency. The New York Times. Trump lawsuit backfires when Microsoft drops law firm which bow to Trump. Microsoft drops Simpson, Thacher and Bartlett law firm from a case. The New York Times. Trump tariffs, 100 days of solitude. Trump and the retreat of America. The New York Times. Trump tariffs as a tariff loophole closes. Sellers who import from China brace for chaos. The New York Times. Trump tariffs, the mixed earnings report of Amazon sends share prices down. The New York Times. 5B Trump vaccines. Kennedy issues demands for vaccine approvals that could affect fall COVID boosters. The New York Times. Kennedy issues demands for vaccine approvals that could affect fall COVID boosters. The plans amount to an extraordinary flex of the Kennedy Jr. power as health secretary to make decisions ordinarily left to career scientists at the Food and Drug Administration. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, May 1, 2025. Health Secretary Kennedy Jr. on Thursday announced plans to require all new vaccines to be tested against placebos and to develop new vaccines without using nanotechnology. Moves that extend his reach deep into vaccine development and raise questions about whether COVID boosters will be available in the fall. A spokesman for the Department of Health and Human Services called the requirement for placebo testing a radical departure from existing standards, but that will depend on how the department defines new, because most new vaccines are already tested either against placebos, inert substances, or in some cases against vaccines for other diseases. Kennedy is one of the leading vaccine skeptics in the United States, and he has been vocal about his disdain for nanotechnology, which was used to develop coronavirus vaccines during the first Trump administration. He once wrote on social media that jabs do not stop infection, do not block transmission, do not block mutants, do not last shots do not work at all. The Kennedy activism in recent years included petitioning the Food and Drug Administration to pull the COVID vaccine off the market in 2021 during a deadly phase of the pandemic. He also urged the FDA not to authorize COVID shots for children. Kennedy has also maintained that there could be a link between vaccines and autism and hired a discredited researcher into his agency whose work aligns with that view. Since becoming health secretary in February, Kennedy has made few high-profile pronouncements on vaccine policy, with the exception of his tepid endorsement of the measles shots in response to the outbreak in Texas that has killed 2 children and 1 adult. But he and the Trump administration have waded into the issue in other ways by ordering a study on vaccines and autism and delaying approval of another COVID vaccine. The Kennedy announcements on Thursday represent an extraordinary use of his power as secretary to make decisions ordinarily left to career scientists at the FDA. The moves follow his recent instructions that parents of newborns considering vaccination should do your own research. Kennedy has said he intends to restore trust in the vaccine approval process, but a former FDA official and an infectious diseases doctor at Georgetown University said the changes could erode trust. Questions never bother me, the infectious diseases doctor said, but it is really worrisome when it seems like they are so ubiquitous and so constant that they sow a huge amount of doubt, not just about the one thing but about everything. Most immediately, the Kennedy move could affect the next round of COVID booster shots expected to become available in the fall. Both flu shots and COVID boosters have been authorized without extensive human trials to target new strains of the virus as it has evolved. Kennedy says the new policy will not affect flu shots, but the future of COVID boosters is now in doubt. Andrew Nixon, the department spokesman, said that because so many people have been infected and now have immunity to COVID, new studies are required. The Kennedy plan for the placebo studies also raises ethical questions. It is considered unethical to deprive even a small group of patients of effective vaccines against deadly pathogens. In the case of COVID-19, new clinical studies could hold up authorization for boosters, which would leave the entire U.S. population vulnerable. A Harvard vaccine researcher and a member of the FDA Vaccine Advisory Committee said that would be unacceptable and that officials must thread the needle to be sure the studies are done in a way that do not leave older and immunocompromised people unprotected from COVID. Tens of thousands of people can die without protection against COVID, said the doctor who co-founded a company working on an opioid vaccine. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reported about 23,000 deaths from COVID since September, with as many as 1,000 a week that month, and in January still uptake of the COVID boosters has been low. About 23% of adults got the updated COVID shot released in the fall, according to the CDC. One CDC study of the COVID boosters used in 2023 and 2024 found that they averted about 68,000 hospital stays and were most effective in people who were older than 65 or immunocompromised. The Kennedy Jr. familiarity with vaccine trials stems, at least in part, from his reviews of decades-old vaccine approvals, including for the polio vaccine and the measles, mumps and rubella vaccine. Kennedy has also helped represent plaintiffs in lawsuits against manufacturers. He and the organization he founded and OneSide Children's Health Defense have repeatedly complained that vaccines are not tested against placebos in clinical trials when they are being developed. The organization has cited polio, hepatitis and meningitis vaccines as examples, all of which were introduced decades ago. Every other medicine is tested against a placebo, Kennedy said on a podcast in January 2020, and claiming that vaccines are exempt from that requirement. That, however, is not entirely correct. Cancer drugs and other medications authorized under the FDA Accelerated Approval Program are regularly authorized after trials without a placebo, and new vaccines, including the vaccines for COVID, were tested against placebos, inert substances such as a saline injection, or in some cases against vaccines for other diseases. We have required placebo-controlled trials for most vaccines, and sometimes it is an inert placebo and sometimes it is an irrelevant vaccine, said Dr. Peter Marks, who was the Food and Drug Administration top vaccine official until he was forced out in March. The claim that we have not done randomized trials for pediatric vaccines aside from COVID is not correct. Kennedy has also raised concerns in the past about testing a vaccine against what many scientists consider a reasonable placebo, the same formula but without the immune-activating agent. In addition to the new placebo requirement, Kennedy also announced a National Institutes of Health initiative to turbocharge the development of new inoculations for COVID, bird flu and seasonal flu, an effort that appears to be part of a broader assault on not technology or platform since they were developed. Kennedy issued numerous social media posts about the not shots, including one positing that the FDA assessment of The Moderna shot for children in 2022 was dishonest and evidence that the public health establishment has abandoned science, logic, reason, rationality, empathy, health and medicine. The NIH under the Trump administration has subjected studies related to the NA platform to strict scrutiny. Bills restricting the use of NA vaccines have popped up in Republican-controlled state legislatures including in Texas, Idaho and Kentucky. The FDA is also holding up approvals of a COVID vaccine that is not based on NA technology. The agency was expected to issue a decision on April 1 regarding whether to issue a full approval of the more traditional protein-based Novavax COVID shot which had been used under emergency authorization. The FDA delayed the decision though, asking the company to conduct additional research. "I'm curious if this administration actually intends to just obliterate the COVID vaccine," said a lawyer with the law firm Epstein Becker Green who represents some vaccine makers. Pfizer and Moderna, makers of the NA COVID shots, did not respond to questions about whether updated shots will be available in the fall in the United States. A spokesman for Moderna said the company has run clinical trials for its booster shots before and after their launch. During an earnings call Thursday, the president of Moderna said the company tests its vaccines against placebos. A policy change had not been communicated to the company directly, he said, but we will absolutely engage constructively in making sure we understand what those needs are and that we fulfill them. The new NIH initiative meanwhile would develop a next-generation vaccine platform that would be fully government-owned. The department said the NIH helped develop the NA platform and the vaccine maker Moderna paid the government hundreds of millions of dollars to license a key patent on the vaccine, though the company and the government later got into a dispute over the patent rights. The NA platform relies on small bits of genetic code which generated online rumors and conspiracy theories that it was being used to insert microchips into vaccine recipients. The new platform, by contrast, would rely on a more traditional method of vaccine development which uses inactivated viruses to provoke an immune response. The department said the new platform would be developed using beta-perlactone, which is already a component in vaccine development but is considered a hazardous substance by the Environmental Protection Agency when people are exposed to it in large doses. United States, Harris returns to political life, warning of a constitutional crisis. The New York Times. United States opinion fight like our democracy depends on it. The New York Times. United States House of Representatives House votes to repeal California clean truck policies. The New York Times. 5C. Hawaii and Michigan lawsuits versus fossil fuel companies face attempted blocks by preemptive Trump lawsuits against both Hawaii and Michigan. Hawaii announced a climate lawsuit, so the government sued Hawaii first. In an unusual move, the Trump administration preemptively sued Hawaii and Michigan to try to stop them from suing oil companies over global warming. A photo of Governor Josh Green of Hawaii in 2023 around the time of devastating wildfires in the state. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. Of 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times. May 1, 2025. On Monday, Gov. Josh Green of Hawaii said his state intended to sue fossil fuel companies over their role in climate change to make them pay for damage from its effects, like the 2023 wildfires that devastated Maui. "I guess this might be breaking news," he said during an interview on local television. "We will be filing suit on Wednesday." The Trump administration sued Hawaii first, seeking to block the lawsuit before it could even be filed. The Justice Department also filed a nearly identical suit against Michigan, where Attorney General Dana Nessel has retained 3 private law firms to pursue climate change litigation but has not yet sued. The main thrust of the Trump argument is that the federal government should determine national energy policy, not individual states. Legal experts said it was highly unusual to sue to block other lawsuits that have yet to be filed. 9 Democratic-led states have already sued fossil fuel companies over climate change, along with dozens of municipalities around the country, including Honolulu and Maui. The oil industry and its allies have tried to get those cases thrown out by making similar arguments to the ones put forth in the Justice Department filings this week. New study could bolster climate laws to make polluters pay. April 23, 2025. 22 states sued to block New York law targeting fossil fuel companies. February 6, 2025. LA fires revive calls for a climate superfund law in California. January 17, 2025. How climate change turned lush Hawaii into a tinderbox. August 10, 2023. The director of the Sabine Center for Climate Change Law at Columbia University said it was at least highly unusual to try to preemptively block lawsuits. The usual procedure would be to move to intervene in existing lawsuits. He said, "I have never heard of a situation where a lawsuit is filed to seek an injunction sanction against somebody else filing a lawsuit. He predicted that such a legal strategy would not fare well procedurally. It is wacky, he said. Both suits filed in federal courts in Hawaii and Michigan named the state its governor and Attorney General. Ms. Nessel called the lawsuit at best frivolous and arguably sanctionable. She said Trump had made clear he will answer any and every beck and call from his big oil campaign donors, and called the lawsuits perhaps the most surprising debasement of both the White House and DOJ. Yet the legal and political battles have been escalating rapidly around the roughly 36 cases brought by state and local governments against energy companies. In January, the Supreme Court denied a request by the defendants in Honolulu, including Sunoco, ExxonMobil and Chevron, to review a Hawaii Supreme Court decision allowing the case to proceed. In March, the justices declined to review an action brought by Republican-governed states against Democratic states that had sued oil companies. Those efforts could have knocked down the entire batch of cases, which supporters call climate deception cases, because many center on the argument that oil companies concealed their knowledge about climate risks. Separately, on Thursday, the Justice Department sued New York and Vermont in federal courts in those states over new climate superfund laws that seek to recoup costs for damage from storms and floods. The New York law put the amount sought at $75 billion. The Vermont law set out a lengthy process to determine the amounts it would pursue in its lawsuits against New York and Vermont. The Justice Department is seeking a declaration that the New York and Vermont laws are unconstitutional and to block their enforcement. 6A headlines. The Guardian, May 1, 2025. Trump interview. Trump pressures journalists to accept doctored photo as real. Why do not you just say yes? Trump. The Guardian. Trump tariffs. Jimmy Kimmel on raid for the Trump first 100 days. Somewhere between F and U. Late night TV roundup. The Guardian. Trump tariffs. Seth Meyers on looming recession. We all knew Trump was bad with money. Late night TV roundup. The Guardian. United States Democrats. Kamala Harris says courage is contagious in major speech excoriating Trump. Kamala Harris. The Guardian. 6B. United States and measles. RFK Jr. and health agency falsely claimed the measles, mumps and rubella vaccine includes aborted fetus debris. Kennedy Jr. The Guardian. Kennedy Jr. RFK Jr. and health agency falsely claim vaccine includes aborted fetus debris. Experts are alarmed as department says it will alter vaccine testing methods and build new surveillance systems. RAWSEP view the vaccine often refers to the R21 matrix vaccine, a malaria vaccine recommended by the World Health Organization (WHO) for use in children. Alternatively, it could be referring to the MMR vaccine, which protects against measles, mumps, and rubella. In this article, the M vaccine refers to the MMR vaccine against measles, mumps, and rubella. RAWSEP view the important thing for Kennedy is delay. These additional Kennedy requirements will delay release of updated vaccines. Except edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The Guardian. May 1, 2025. Health Secretary Kennedy Jr. and his department have made a series of misleading statements that alarmed vaccine experts and advocates in recent days, including that the measles, mumps and rubella vaccine includes aborted fetus debris. Health department officials released statements saying they could alter vaccine testing and build new surveillance systems on Wednesday, both of which have unnerved experts who view new placebo testing as potentially unethical. It is his goal to even further lessen trust in vaccines and make it onerous enough for manufacturers that they will abandon it, said an expert on infectious disease and immunology and the director of the Vaccine Education Center at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia about the statements in Kennedy. It is a fragile market, and the same week Kennedy exhorted parents to do their own research in a talk show interview. The phrase has become pop culture shorthand for a shallow internet search that casts people into the arms of the disinformation ecosystem. Private firms are trying to fill research gaps, but their puny budgets are no match for federal funds. All new vaccines will undergo safety testing and placebo-controlled trials prior to licensure, a radical departure from past practices, an HHS spokesperson told The Washington Post in response to questions about general vaccine policy and the measles vaccine. The department did not clarify what it meant by new vaccine prior to being confirmed to the role of Health Secretary. Kennedy was arguably the most prominent anti-vaccine advocate in the United States and led a non nonprofit known for prolific misinformation. He also earned money by referring clients to law firms suing vaccine makers. Kennedy also claimed this week that the vaccine includes aborted fetus debris. The Rubella vaccine, like many vaccines, is produced using decades-old sterile fetal cell lines derived from two elective terminations in the 1960s. Vaccines against new pathogens such as COVID-19 are placebo-tested. However, experts consider new placebo-controlled trials for long-time vaccines, for instance measles, to be unethical because it would effectively deny a patient an own intervention while potentially exposing them to a dangerous disease. No institutional review board at any academic center would ever accept that, so he is asking what personal injury lawyer invariably asks for, which is the impossible to be done, said Offit. Although Kennedy has made false and misleading statements about vaccines generally, the COVID-19 vaccine appears to be especially in the Trump-Kennedy Jr. crosshairs. In response to recent questions about COVID-19 strategy, the administration responded, the COVID-19 pandemic is over and HHS will no longer waste millions of taxpayer dollars responding to a non-existent pandemic that Americans moved on from years ago. How revenge of the COVID contrarians unleashed by RFK Jr. puts broader vaccine advances at risk. Health officials have reportedly required all research grant applications on messenger RNA technology, which powers most COVID-19 vaccines, be flagged to the Kennedy office. They have also ended research that tested for safety and efficacy of the COVID-19 vaccine in special groups as part of an $11 billion clawback in grants from states. Most controversially, the Food and Drug Administration has delayed expected approval of a new COVID-19 vaccine from Novavax, reportedly on the review of a political appointee known to be skeptical of vaccines. Over the weekend, FDA Commissioner Marty Makary addressed the delay by describing annual updates to the COVID vaccine strains as a new product, creating confusion about whether vaccine makers have to conduct new safety and efficacy trials. Such trials would not be a normal part of routine updates. On Monday, the company Novavax released a statement that said in part the FDA had demanded a clinical trial as part of post-approval surveillance and that it would continue to work with the FDA. 6 United States in science and medicine private firms are trying to fill research gaps, but their puny budgets are no match for federal funds. Trump administration. The Guardian. Private firms are trying to fill research gaps, but their puny budgets are no match for federal funds. Trump and Musk have got national institutes of health, and experts are wary of the ability of private efforts to replicate public service. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The Guardian. May 2025. The federal government has slashed research since Trump took office, hacking away at the National Institutes of Health (NIH) and its grant staff in long-held partnerships with academia. Now some private companies said they want to pick up strands of research that might have otherwise been funded by the federal government. The effort has stoked little optimism among experts who caution that private efforts cannot remotely replicate the breadth, depth or public service provided by federal funding. We cannot wait 4 years to do any women's health research, said Priyanka Jain, co-founder and the CEO of the startup Bevi. The company sells at-home vaginal microbiome tests, a product the company argues can help women better understand common conditions such as bacterial vaginosis. Jain said Bevi is funding a small trial to identify biomarkers or physical indicators of how the vaginal microbiome can impact in vitro fertilization (IVF) success rates. There are companies like Heavy raising venture dollars and doing the work the government is not doing, said Jain. Women step up and actually solve this problem. In contrast, health policy insiders such as Sean Tipton, the chief policy officer at the American Society for Reproductive Medicine, said the many small projects that hope to keep research alive cannot remotely match the retreat of federal government research. It is absolutely not realistic to think that the resources of the federal government can be replaced through some combination of philanthropic and for-profit entities trying to fill the gap, said Tipton. The NIH is the largest public funder of biomedical and behavioral research in the world. When Trump took office, the agency had a $48 billion budget and funded projects into nearly every area of medicine imaginable, including administration bugbears such as fluoride and vaccine safety. In the first few months of the administration, the Health Secretary Kennedy Jr. and billionaire Elon Musk unofficial Department of Government Efficiency have fired 1,300 NIH employees, canceled $2 billion in grants and slowed new grant approval by nearly one-third, pumping $2.3 billion less into research. A leaked budget proposal would further shrink the NIH by 40% or tens of billions less that will not go in into research. HHS has also cancelled more than $11 billion in state grants and frozen billions in grants slated for research at Ivy League colleges such as Harvard University. In the latest move, the National Science Foundation, which finances basic research in areas such as astronomy and quantum computing, canceled $2 billion more in funding in the research space. My organization is proud because we are now spending in excess of $3 million a year in research grants. That is literally a rounding error compared to what the federal government spends. Tipton said, we are very proud of that and worked very hard to get it up to that level, and that level is puny and inadequate. The federal government backing of scientific research has been fundamental to modern drug discovery. NIH research contributed to 354 of 356 of the drugs approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration (FDA) between 2010-2019. A JAMA Health Forum study found that money has gone to advance blockbuster drugs such as Wegovy and Ozempic, first identified by an NIH-funded researcher and isolated from Gila monster saliva by Veterans Affairs researchers, and to the hundreds lesser-known FDA-approved treatments. Tell taxpayers we are studying Gila monsters in a lab, they will laugh you out of town. But the first GLP-1 was exenatide, which is a Gila monster protein, said Dr. Fred Ledley, the author of the JAMA Health Forum study. Research found that for every first-in-class innovative drug brought to market, the NIH funded roughly $1.4 billion in research. If government investment was calculated as industry calculates its investment to include failure and the cost of capital, it is closer to $2.8 billion in public funding, or about the equivalent of what industry spends to bring an innovative drug to market without the NIH basic research. There is little hope that the private market will pick up the tab, said Ledley. It is too expensive for them. Ledley said, what you will see industry do is develop more me-too drugs and incremental tweaking. This is not what the public wants. The public wants something to treat Alzheimer's with. They want something to prevent diabetes in the first place, and they desperately need better treatments for cancer and heart disease, still the number one killer, said Ledley. Another indicator of the low likelihood of the industry picking up basic research is in job listings. Since 1 January, listings for research and development positions have fallen 25% based on a before times baseline of January 2020 baseline, according to data from job hiring site Indeed. Instead, the private health sector is dominated by demand for services such as nurses and surgeons. The government can step in and correct that kind of market failure when something is going to be positive for the society but not necessarily profitable in the market, said an economist with Indeed. A lot of this research falls into that category. Put another way by the Democratic U.S. Senator Patty Murray at a recent press conference, our public health folks who go out and track measles or track whooping cough or track a new pandemic are not going to work for a private company. There is not a profit-making course in this. In the world of last year, we were hoping to get funding from the federal government for the study by her company, said Jane. I personally do not think we should have to raise venture capital money to do this study. That is not the typical use of venture capital money, said Jane. Our hope is we survive another 4 years and the tides turn. United States and UN envoy nomination. Trump nominates scandal hint Mike Waltz as UN envoy after exit as national security chief. Live United States video game simulation skin deep review. Kitty rescue immersive sim is slapstick fun in a cartoony playground. Games The Guardian 60 United States video game writing playing with words. Why novelists are becoming video game writers, and vice versa. Games The Guardian. While the novel remains a high-status cultural form, video game writing is still seen as a throwaway art despite some of the biggest names in fiction being involved. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The Guardian, April 30, 2025. I have been working in games for a little more than 15 years, and the main thing I would say about it at this point is that it is a pretty annoying job to explain at parties. People often say something like, oh, I do not really play games, which is surely an odd thing to tell a game designer moments after you have been introduced. I do not really eat croissants, but that is not the first thing I bring up if I meet a baker. So one of the joys of publishing my first novel last year was the option to sidestep all of that and say, oh, I am a writer, I wrote a novel, I am working on another novel, job done. The conversation can move on. Nobody says, oh, I do not really read books, even though that is at least as likely to be true. It has become clear to me that I am not alone in switching between the two media. Why is this? Well, for a lot of people it is the money. Writing novels is a notoriously difficult way to make a living, and novelists have always wrangled together careers out of whatever is going. A 2022 report commissioned by the Author Licensing and Collecting Society (ALCS) found that professional authors are paid a median of £7,000 a year from their writing. A writer whose debut novel made the USA bestseller list says her day job writing for video games is part of what makes that novel writing possible. "Thankfully I have a consistent paycheck coming in," she says, which is an advantage because the payment structures in publishing are not exactly sustainable. At the same time, game writers are also having a rough time of it. The GDC 2025 State of the Games Industry report claimed that 1 in 5 narrative designers and writers had been laid off in the previous year, so of course some game writers are looking for opportunities elsewhere. Games are still young compared with the novel, and their conventions are less fixed. Early English novelists like Catherine Ben and Lawrence Stern could print a page entirely black and push at the still forming edges of what a novel was. Games are newer and with a lower cultural status remain malleable, plus writing often comes pretty far down the list of priorities in game design, and that is okay. Games are not novels. The emerging generation of young writers grew up as native video game players, so they are willing and able to switch between the two cultural forms without finding it weird and without seeing one is necessarily better than the other. Sure, if you work in games there are still people at parties who will say, "Oh, I do not really play those," but sometimes that might mean you get to make something weirder and more surprising while nobody is looking sexy. United Kingdom ugly, old-fashioned, weird. The baby names that set the teeth of grandparents on edge. Baby names. The Guardian. United Kingdom author Barbara Pym may have worked for MI5. Research suggests books. The Guardian. Ukraine. Trump administration readies first sale of military equipment to Ukraine. The Guardian. The PM of Ukraine hails good and equal minerals deal with US-Europe. Live 7-8 headlines. Other media. May 1, 2025. 7B May Day protests. Thousands rally against Trump Musk in nationwide May Day protests. Live updates. Trump fires Mike Waltz probably over Signalgate security breach. Trump to continue 100 days celebration by firing his first high-level appointee. 7C Trump tariffs versus United States Senate. A bipartisan measure to undo the Trump global tariffs fails in the Senate. Russia. The tables have turned and the Russia of Putin is now in dire trouble.
Cat's Corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. Saying the quiet part out loud. Roar. Hi, I am Tiger. Hi, I am Leone. Our human asked us to get up from our naps and start Cat's Corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. She gave us a list of internet allies which we will post for her here. It is better for your mental fitness to go to these websites than to go to bro sites for advice. Substack letters from an American Heather Cox Richardson. Substack your neighborhood epidemiologist. The Meados Touch. The Guardian. The New York Times. 1 Introduction. RAWSEP view. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only for home building and furniture building. For just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable, wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen, and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lung, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, the Eco Design Wood Stove International, Convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. RAWSEP view purple air PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.